Hey everyone, Shaedow here, and welcome to another Marvel Contest of Champions video. So I've been getting a lot of requests to show my mastery setup. So I'm going to go through my masteries, and then we're going to talk about individual masteries, suicide masteries, and I'll also mention some champions that play nice with suicide masteries, as well as some that do not. All right, so first, just take a look here. This is my current mastery setup. Now, let me start by saying there is no perfect mastery setup. There is no mastery setup that is the best mastery setup. What you want to do is look at the champions that you use the most to complete content. Alliance quest, alliance war, questing, and you want to select masteries that support those champions. Okay? So let's look at the offensive tree here. So off to the left are what I consider more or less a standard type of a build. All right, so you have to do strength. Okay? You have to do greater strength. I only recommend 1 point in either one of these. Okay, same with Pierce, although perhaps you want to play around with it, but there's better places to spend your points, and you do have a limited number of points. All right, 1 point in lesser precision, 1 point in lesser cruelty. Now here, precision, this is one of the big boys that you can max out, and it's still good to max out. Okay, you'll notice that I haven't maxed this out. That's because I took 1 point and put it into courage. I like courage. Sometimes I max it out. This time I have only 1 point in it. Okay, and cruelty I always max out. Why? Because my main champion that I use is Corvis. Corvis has guaranteed criticals as long as he has glaive charges. So he benefits from that critical damage that just increases his damage. As opposed to precision, this doesn't help my Corvis at all, really. Unless something is going on that I don't know about. He cannot crit when his glaive charges are down, and he's guaranteed crits when they are up. So this mastery doesn't really help. Also, it doesn't really help that much with my Spider-Man Stark Enhanced, who's another champion that I use. So 2 of my main champions, this doesn't help all that much, but it's still a very useful mastery, and you still have to have a certain number of points on the left side here in order to get points on the right side. So you can max out precision if you want to. That's fine. All right, now let's go up to the top here. First is glass cannon. Glass cannon is okay. I used to max it out, but nowadays I only put 1 point in it. I don't think it's worth the extra points. I have other places I'd like to use those points. Then we have recoil. Okay, now you're starting along the lines of suicides. You hear people talk about suicide masteries. Here are the suicide masteries. You have to get recoil in order to get the suicide masteries. Okay, recoil is the price you pay for suicide masteries. So as you can see here, you're going to take damage for every special. So once you have recoil, your game style, your fighting style is going to change, or else you're going to kill yourself. So you don't want to throw lots of specials. That means that champions that rely heavily on their specials are not good with suicides on. All right. Next, we have liquid courage. You get an increase of 30% when it's maxed out, and I recommend you always max. If you decide to get liquid courage or double edge or both, always max them out. Okay, so it increases the attack of all champions by 30%, but they suffer a permanent poison debuff. So now if you have champions that are poison immune, then this doesn't apply. They just get the 30% and they just have to deal with recoil. So that's a nice thing to keep in mind as well. And then here we have Double Edge, which is the same as the Liquid Courage, except this is a bleed and it's not permanent. So you will bleed at the start of the fight for a certain amount of time, 16 seconds here, and that's it. All right. Now, those are the suicide masteries. What are they good for? Mainly arena. If you are a heavy arena grinder like I am, this speeds up your arena grind considerably. It does so much that I really don't even want to grind arena when I don't have these on. Now, sometimes I will leave off Liquid Courage. I won't turn it on at all, and I'll only run Double Edge. All right? And there's a reason for that. Again, one of my main champions is Corvis. And we'll talk a little bit more about how Corvis interacts with Double Edge, especially with the Willpower Mastery. All right? Now, next we've got Despair. I recommend everyone max out Despair. It is useful no matter what. Okay? And you can see what it does. It also aids, like if you were running Void, this helps him out a ton. But it actually has a usefulness with any champion that does a lot of debuffs. So for example, Realm of Legends Winter Soldier. If you're familiar with him, you know he has a crazy regen, and so if you're trying to complete that content, you need to deal with his regen. Well, if you have maxed out Despair, you can go in with champions that debuff a lot, because that will shut down his healing eventually. I saw someone actually complete that fight with a Netflix Daredevil, someone that I would normally not think about bringing in for that purpose. But because of maxed out Despair and because they have so many debuffs that they place on their opponent, it was able to shut down his healing. So Despair is a great mastery to max out. Next we have Deep Wounds. I would love to max out Deep Wounds, but I don't have the points. Deep Wounds, when I'm not running suicides, which these days is pretty much never, I'm always running them these days, but one of my builds, which was a non-suicide build, I always max out Deep Wounds and Assassin. Okay, so Deep Wounds, you can see I put 2 points into this. Again, I could have taken 1 point out of here and maxed out Precision. But remember, I said that I took 1 point out, put it into Courage, so that I had the points that I needed to unlock the right-hand side of the tree. All right? So this is a point. I could have still put that into Precision and just run with 1 Deep Wounds. I've done that before. But having that extra second helps a lot, especially when you're running Deep Wounds. So anytime you are fighting with a bleeder, Deep Wounds helps a lot. I run with Blade also. You know, I have a lot of champions that bleed. Corvis doesn't bleed. Spider-Man Stark Enhanced doesn't bleed. But Ghost Rider bleeds. And so does Blade. And I use them together quite often. Gwenpool, she bleeds a lot. X-23. You know, a lot of champions benefit from this. All right? And then we have Assassin, which I mentioned earlier. And 1 point is enough in this particular mastery, but I like having 2 points as well. When they get down below 18% of their health, it's a nice little finisher. You know, you finish the fights faster. And again, if you're running arena, this helps a lot. It's noticeable. But 1 point is just huge. 2 points, you know, and if I can max it out, I will, but not when I'm running suicides. All right, so let's go over to the defensive tree. Now, what you're seeing off to the left here is my standard tree. I don't really change this much at all. Okay, so 1 point in vitality, 1 point in greater vitality, 1 point in salve. I don't recommend maxing this out. You can use your points in better places. Recovery, I do recommend maxing that out. It helps. Now, recovery, it increases any health that your champions recover. Okay, so that is Blade. When he heals any healing champions, that helps. And when we talk about willpower, it helps there as well. There's also some nodes. I don't remember the name of the node, but there's one where you degen half your health, half your max health, and then you regen back. Well, if you start the fight already hurt, you're still going to degen 50% off your max, not 50% of the health that you currently have. But recovery, you actually gain health because you have that extra boost. All right. Next, you have energy resistance. That's useful sometimes. I used to max it out when we didn't have a counter for magic because her limbo was energy damage. So it has its uses. But mostly I put a point in here to get to this one, which I recommend everyone max out, physical resistance. Okay. And you can see what it does. It's very simple. It reduces the physical damage. Brian Grant, another YouTuber, did a test and showed just how useful this is, all right, in reducing your damage. So, you know, your parries, all kind of things, it helps a lot. And finally, on this side, we got block proficiency. What's not to like? Max it out. All right, now, let's go over here. Now, I've maxed out willpower. You don't have to, especially if you're not running suicides, but I recommend at least 1 point in willpower always. So every time you get hit with a debuff, and it's a new type of debuff, you're going to regenerate a little bit of health. That recovery actually helps this out as well. And here's something to think about. If you take a debuff that doesn't actually do damage to you, like an armor break, it triggers willpower, so you'll heal without taking damage. So very useful. So like King Groot, it's a nice little trick. If he has Furies up, get hit with his special one and you get a permanent armor break on you. And if you have willpower, you will be healing for the entire fight. Very nice, very useful. I recommend 1 point no matter what. And here is optional, coagulate. I do it mainly because I'm running both suicides, and this helps quite a bit to reduce my damage from that bleed. All right, now I mentioned how Corvis plays very nicely with suicides. Well, first of all, suicides increase his attack, so he's going to be doing a lot more damage. Now, one thing about Corvis is when he has glaive charges up, he is actually immune, not quite immune, but he doesn't take any bleed damage. But since he's not immune to bleed, he still gets the bleed debuff. Remember what I said about willpower. So he gets the bleed debuff, and he will heal if you have willpower. So the entire time at the beginning of the fight, while Double Edge is bleeding me, I'm healing with Corvis. And it heals more than I take, so it's a nice little heal. Now, if you're running Liquid Courage as well, then of course your healing is reduced, but it's still a nice heal all the same. Okay? So Corvis, definitely one of the champions that benefits greatly from suicides. Another champion that benefits from suicides is Omega Red. He benefits greatly. Omega Red is poison immune, So Liquid Courage is not going to do anything to him. But he takes 90% reduced bleed damage. So guess what? If you put at least 1 point in Coagulate, Omega Red is now bleed immune. And while he is bleeding, he actually activates his death field and does a whole lot more damage. It is insane. If you don't know about Omega Red, check him out. All right. So lastly, we've got the proficiencies. Used to be called utilities. And they changed things around here a little bit. But first up, we've got parry. I always max that out. Next up, we have limber. Now, when we were pushing in Alliance War, I would max this out. It's great, not only offensively, but defensively. It mostly benefits defensively, but it actually does have an offensive benefit. But unless I'm actually pushing in war, there's no need for me to max out limber. But you might like limber. I don't know. For me, not so much. I have other places I want to use my points. Now, if I had the points, sure, I would put them in limber. All right, down here, we've got dexterity. Definitely want 1 point in dexterity. They did change this so that it actually has a little bit of a benefit if you max it out, but I don't max it out. It's not that much of a benefit as far as I could see, and I have better places to use my points. And you have Stupefy here. Always max that out. When I don't max out Stupefy, I notice it. It actually increases the stun duration. Now, here's something interesting with that. All right, so let's take a look here. Let's see at parry here. Okay, so read what parry says. At the end, stun duration increases with perfect block chance. Okay, so let's go back over, and we'll come back to proficiencies, but let's go over to defense. Okay, so now along the bottom here, you got perfect block. So I don't usually put any points in this, but putting more points in this increases your stun duration thanks to parry. All right. Now, I'm not a big fan of this particular mastery, but it's not a bad mastery to put points into. Most people put points into that just so they could get to stand your ground, which is another mastery I don't really like too much. I used to max it out, but it did not trigger enough for me to waste all of those points into it. And I consider it a waste because it didn't trigger. I fought, I don't know how many fights, and I think it had it triggered once or twice in like 30 or 40 fights. I was like, no, not worth it to me. But your mileage may vary. All right. And another one here, I did unlock it. And there is a build where you would max out collar tech. It could be useful. I know people, if you're running tech champions as your main, like Darkhawk or Spider-Man Stark Enhanced, it can be useful. All right. So let's go back over to proficiencies and let's take a look here. All right. So here we have Petrify. So when your champions inflict stun debuffs, they also reduce enemy regeneration rate and power gained from attacking or being attacked. All right. So that's actually kind of useful, but not really. I used to max this out as well. And it can be useful, but we have champions that have a lot of this built in. And if I'm going up against someone where I would need this type of thing, I would just use champions that excel at that, and I don't need to put any points here. And next, we have Pacify. Now, I used to max this out back when there weren't any counters really to Magic and her Limbo. This gave you a chance to prevent her Limbo. So when your champions inflict stun debuffs, they also reduce enemy ability accuracy for the duration of the stun. So what you would do is you would push her to almost a bar of power. Then you would parry stun her and then push her over the bar. And this mastery would give you a chance. She could still proc it. If she had a high signature level, there was still a good chance that she would proc her limbo. So this, to me, waste of points. We have many counters these days. Not useful. All right. Now, the next one over here, Mystic Dispersion. Now, it recently got changed. All right. Mystic Dispersion used to be the go-to for pretty much anyone running Mystic champions, defense, offense, what have you. Now, not so much on defense, but it's still useful on offense, especially if you're running like Symbiote Supreme or Doc Strange if you're, you know, at the lower levels, since he's only available as a 4-star as far as I know. But it's still useful, just not as powerful as it used to be. Okay, now I have it unlocked to 2 levels. I have enough to unlock it to 3, but I'm waiting until I rank up my Symbiote Supreme and start doing some content using him. All right. And lastly, the one we're going to talk about is Scouter Lens. When we were pushing in war, this was pretty much required. Now, to get Scouter Lens, you see that you have to have 11 points. So what I would do in order to get Scouter Lens, I would need to put at least 4 more points, or rather 3 more points into Limber. And if I went that far, chances are I was going to just go ahead and max it out. And then I would put 1 point in Scouter Lens. Very useful in war, especially since they have a Scouter Lens bot. I talk about it in my Alliance War videos all the time, and there's a link in the description of those videos. But the Scouter Lens bot takes the information that is revealed from this mastery and pretty much tells you who it is that you're going to be facing before you jump into the fight, so that you're able to select, of the 3 champions you decided to bring in, select which one is going to be the best for that encounter. Okay, so that is pretty much it. That's my mastery setup and a little bit about the different masteries. Don't look at those XP masteries. Don't get them. Also, there's the gold one up here. Don't do it. You see, I don't even have it unlocked or anything like that. And pretty much the other masteries I don't have unlocked. They're not really good, to be honest with you. All right. So we already mentioned a few champions that do well with suicides. Corvis and Omega Red come to my mind right away. So what makes a champion not good with suicides? Well, I mentioned it earlier. Anyone that relies heavily on their specials is not going to work well with suicides. So, for example, OG Vision. OG Vision is the king of power control. I consider him the king, Magic the queen. But he relies heavily on his specials. He has to spam that special 1 or special 2 to keep their power under control. Well, if you have that recoil, you're taking damage each time, and you're going to pretty much kill yourself if the fight is going to go on for pretty long. Okay? Now, a champion that also does very well with suicides is Ghost. Ghost, when she phases, she will remove the poison and the bleed, and she'll get a buff instead. So she plays extremely well with the suicide masteries, and it just increases her damage. It's insane. If you haven't seen Ghost gameplay, check it out. And with the right synergy, she can also phase the recoil damage. So unlike other champions, with the exception of a few, she can actually avoid the recoil damage. Another one is Magic. Magic plays well with suicides because when she fires her specials, she also fires off Limber. So even though recoil will proc, her limbo would actually heal her right back up. So she is one that actually plays well with suicides. So there are champions that play well. There are champions that do not. And there are champions that really benefit from the suicides. Depending on who you have, you want to evaluate your own roster, who you use the most, who you've ranked up, and then decide which masteries are going to benefit those champions and your particular play style the best. You know, that stand your ground is not useless. It depends on your play style. My play style, it's not useful to me, and I have other places I want to place those points. Okay, so that's going to do it, guys. Hopefully this has helped you out in selecting your masteries. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave them in the comments below, and I will answer your questions as best that I can. All right, so click like, subscribe, leave a comment, share this with your friends. If anyone needs some help with their masteries, share the video with them. And you guys have a blessed day.